Moi everyone and welcome to Finnish Plate. Bread is of course an everyday item on the Finnish table, specifically rye bread. So it's no surprise that it's very heavily presented also on the Finnish Christmas table. I have here a couple of different types of bread that you might find on the Finnish Christmas table. First of all, there's just plain sourdough made from wheat flour. There's some rye bread here, sourdough rye, that I made myself. Then there's a sourdough rye that has been sweetened with molasses and some rye malt, which is common in southwestern parts of Finland. I actually found this bread at my local Eastern European store, and they even had it labeled as Finnish style rye bread. And then there's a couple of crisp breads. There's some Fin Crisp over here, which is available in the US in the regular grocery stores pretty readily. Then there's some crisp bread here, which is a little bit thicker, a little bit harder, but very shelf stable. This is a common item in Finland, especially in the army. They serve this almost every day. And then there's another type of crisp bread, which is more in the style of the archipelago bread, meaning that it's also sweetened with some rye malt. So if you're looking for Finnish style bread, sometimes you can even find it at your local Eastern European grocery if you have one around, or you can order online, or of course you can also make it yourself. Making rye bread like this is super simple. Most often Finns like to have their bread with maybe just a little bit of butter, or nowadays more so with margarine, or sometimes with a little bit of spreadable cheese on top of it. The night before baking, measure equal amounts of water and rye flour. I have here some plain old water, tap water, so I'm just going to measure how much I actually have. I have 800 grams of water. So now I'm going to measure 800 grams of rye flour. There we go. Also measure out 2% of the flour weight of salt. So since I have 800 grams, I'm going to measure out 16 grams of salt. Now we're just going to mix about 2/3 of the rye flour in here. We're going to reserve about 1/3. And now we will add 2 tablespoons of our starter that we fed last night. I just have a wheat sourdough starter. It works just as well. You could use a dedicated rye sourdough starter, but in my experience, it's not necessary. And we'll just mix this all in, mix the starter in. And there we go. Our rye starter is ready. Now remember, we're not going to add the last of the flour plus the salt until tomorrow. We're going to cover this, leave this on the counter, and get back to it in the morning. So now it's the next morning. Our dough has fermented, so we're just going to add the rest of the flour in, not forgetting the salt that we measured yesterday. And now we are just going to mix this just a little. Remember, it's rye dough, so there's not going to be any gluten. We're just going to mix it to make sure everything's incorporated. Just slowly, so we don't get rye flour all over the place. And that's really all that's needed. Now we'll just use a silicone spatula just to get the dough off the mixer. Now I'm going to take a cookie sheet, put some parchment paper on it. We're going to sprinkle this with some rye flour on the bottom. And I'm going to take my largest ice cream scoop. This is an automatic ice cream scoop. I think this is a number 12 scoop. So the diameter is almost 2 inches. I think it's just a little shy of 2 inches. But I'm gonna scoop I'm gonna scoop 7 scoops. Try to get them on top of each other as much as possible. You don't have to be exact, but the closer to on top of each other you get, the rounder your bread will be. Now I'm gonna wet my hands, and with wet hands, kind of look like doing pottery. I'm just going to spread out the dough, trying to make it as round as possible. Once your fingers start sticking, it's time to wet them again. So the dough should be about 1/4 inch thick, maybe 1/2 inch thick. And the bread should be fairly large. Try to even out so that it's perfect circle. Obviously, it's one of those things, whether it's perfect circle or not, it's not going to affect the taste. It's going to look a little bit more rustic, like mine is a little bit oblong. That's all right. It's perfectly fine. And now I'm going to use a cookie cutter to cut that distinctive hole in the middle. Select a cookie cutter that's kind of proportional to the size of your bread. Too small, and it kind of looks weird, and also too large, and same thing again. So try to pick something that's about, at most, I would say, 1/3 of the size, 1/3 of the diameter of the bread itself, at most. And I'm just gonna spray some oil on it, just so that the dough it has a tendency to stick really bad. This is very sticky dough. So now we're just gonna press center, do a quick twist, and then scoop out the center. And now we'll just sprinkle some more rye flour on the bread. A lot of times also what you see is patterns where there's already sectors cut out from the bread. Or you could even write your initials on the bread, like so. Now we're going to leave this proofing while we're doing the other breads. And the last thing we'll do before baking the bread, we're just going to dock the dough with a dough docker. Now the bread is out of the oven. It took a little bit longer than 15 minutes, more like 25 minutes to bake it. But here we go. Our Finnish reikäleipä is ready. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Finish Your Plate.